The 2018 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. The Republican race for insurance commissioner.
Good afternoon. I'm Candace Presley, Manager of Program Operations for WSB Radio and the Head of Community Affairs for Cox Media Group's Atlanta radio stations. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting here in Atlanta. This is the debate among Republican candidates for Insurance Commissioner. Let's meet those candidates. They are, in alphabetical order, Jim Beck, the General Manager of Operations for the Georgia Underwriting Association. Jay Florence serves as Georgia's Deputy Insurance Commissioner. And Tracy Jordan is a licensed pharmacist, a full-time realtor, and member of the Houston City Council in North Georgia. Now let's meet our panelists. Andy Miller is CEO and editor of Georgia Health News. And Dave Williams reports on government for the Atlanta Business Chronicle. Now we begin. For the rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question by one of the panelists. Dave Williams, you get the first question for Jay Florence.
Good afternoon, Mr. Florence.
Good afternoon.
You say on your campaign website that you have a history in serving as Deputy Insurance Commissioner of prosecuting criminals for insurance fraud. Can you give us some examples of cases you've been involved in?
Yeah, and you know what? Not just criminals, but also insurance companies that had run afoul of Georgia law. If you look at a situation where there was an insurance company that was overcharging senior citizens for Medicare policies, we took action and fined them over $700,000 and made them roll back those rates. There's countless examples of insurance fraud that we arrest folks every day. A recent example comes to mind, and that's a public adjuster that was not representing his clients well and was taking the money that the insurance company had paid and putting it directly in his pocket. That's a fundamental job of the insurance commissioner, is to go after criminals like that, and I've got a history of doing it.
All right, Andy Miller, now you have a question for Tracy Jordan.
Georgia has the third highest rate of people without health insurance. As an insurance commissioner, if elected, what would you do to improve that situation?
Thank you for that question, and that is something that has impacted too many people across the state of Georgia. I've seen that in my practice as a pharmacist in Jackson County, and we need to come up with solutions that allow for health insurance for everyone across the state of Georgia. We need to think outside of the box, come up with some type of plans that could better insure all of the people across the state of Georgia, whether it's a pool that allows for everyone in Georgia that's in a healthy group versus those that may have some health issues. If we do a plan that allows for people in certain types of professions, whether it's construction or realtor or something, we need to think outside of the box and do something that allows people across the state of Georgia to have affordable insurance that they can use when necessary.
And Dave Williams, we're going to come back to you to ask a question of Jim Beck.
Well, Mr. Beck, like Jay Florence, you have been at one time a Deputy Insurance Commissioner, but you've also spent a lot of time in the private sector, in the insurance business. How do you believe having both that public and private sector experience would help you succeed as the head honcho of the State Insurance Commissioner?
I think that's a great question, and that's a very fair question. You know, we have folks that say, well, I don't have any experience, and that's okay because I'm a quick learner. We have folks that say I have experience there. I've been a small business person. I know what it's like to sign the front of a paycheck. I built a small business starting my dorm room at West Georgia. We grew to 36 employees and sold several years later. But I have been Deputy Insurance Commissioner, and I was instrumental in helping create the fraud unit. We did a roofing undercover sting. We brought out 10 roofers just straight out of the Yellow Pages. We arrested 9 of them before they hit the ground because they were defrauding the disabled homeowner. We had hidden cameras. We caught it all. There's a lot of fraud. My grandmother was robbed by a disreputable agent when she was later in life, and so it touched me in a very profound way. Insurance is a promise, and we need to be about making sure that people are in the promise-keeping business.
Thank you very much. Now that concludes the first portion of our debate. The candidates now will ask a question to an opponent of his or her choice. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, Tracy Jordan, you may ask the first question to one of your opponents.
I believe that I will ask a question of Jay Florence. I would like to know what made you decide that you wanted to become insurance commissioner, and at what time of your life did that happen, and what were you doing before 2011?
So I decided that I was going to run for insurance commissioner soon after Ralph Hudgens announced that he was not going to run for re-election. I was at the time serving as the deputy insurance commissioner, a position from which I've resigned now to focus on my campaign. And frankly, it was the same day that Ralph Hudgens announced that he was not going to run for re-election. And the reason I did it is because I believe it's a job that matters. It's a job that can really impact people's lives if you elect someone that understands what the job does. I came right out of law school in 2011, and I started working as an enforcement attorney, going after insurance agents and companies who had violated Georgia law. Worked for 4 years as Ralph Hudgens' legislative liaison, advancing some good, common-sense, conservative legislation before the members of the General Assembly. Left for a little while and came back in 2017 to serve as deputy insurance commissioner, a place where I stayed until 2 months ago when I resigned to focus full-time on my campaign. And I announced immediately because I think it's a job that matters if you elect someone that understands the job. And from my background, I do.
Thank you. That's your time. You have a 30-second rebuttal.
I think that's important. I have known I've wanted to be in this position since the John Oxendine days. Jay had privy to inside information that Ralph Hudgens did not wish to seek re-election, so I was a little behind on the time curve of being able to have that knowledge. But this is something I've been in pursuit of for over 10 years, and I'm not tied to the industry insiders. I am not a career politician, and I'm not funded by the large insurance companies, and therefore I know I can represent the people across the state of Georgia best, because my experience with every type of insurance has given me the opportunity to know.
Thank you very much. Jay Florence, now it's your turn to ask a question of one of your opponents.
I'll ask it of Jim Beck. Jim, you were a lobbyist for insurance companies in 2008 when the legislature passed the law which created a file and use law which took away from the insurance commissioner the authority to properly review rates. And in 2011, you said that that law would lower rates for Georgia consumers because it would increase competition. Do you agree with me now that that law needs to be repealed and we need to go back to a system where the insurance commissioner has the proper and clear legal authority to overturn rates that are excessive?
Jay, I've advocated for a lot of organizations. Christian Coalition, I've been president of for 16 years, and Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and Georgia Family Council, now Georgia Family Alliance. I will tell you that I was very disappointed in the way the 2008 law turned out. I think the commissioner has the tools in his toolbox now to do the job, but I'm all for protecting the consumers. So if that involves the legislature giving the commissioner, whoever he or she may be, more tools, I think that's something that's very much needed.
Jay, you get 30 seconds of a rebuttal.
Well, very good. I think people in this state expect that they have an insurance commissioner that can look at rates and roll them back if they're excessive. I think we need to change the law to reflect that fact, and I will do that on day one as insurance commissioner.
Thank you very much. Jim Beck, you get the final question.
You know, we spend a lot of time with each other, and I have gotten to know, I knew Jay from years ago. Jay actually worked for me for a time, but I've gotten to know Miss Jordan. And I asked Jay this question the other night. We were at a joint appearance, and I think it does a lot to put a person's character and point of view in perspective. Tracy, which character on the Andy Griffin Show do you like the most?
You know...
And you and I are old enough to remember it when it first came out.
You know, I think Aunt B.
That's awesome. I think Jay said the same thing,
did.
so that's fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that with me.
Thank you.
Did you have something else you wanted to add in your rebuttal?
I found out what I needed to know.
All right, then. That concludes our second round. For those of you just joining us, this is the debate between the Republican candidates for insurance commissioner. We now will go back to our panel to ask questions to the candidate of his choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I might also ask a question of our candidates. I will determine when or if a rebuttal is appropriate. Andy Miller, you get the first question in this round.
Jim, I want you to talk about the really high premium increases in auto insurance. What's the reason for that? Many Georgians are feeling these every year. And what can be done? What would you like to see happen in order to moderate those increases?
Andy, it is the topic I hear from people. When I started in the insurance business working in an independent insurance agency when I was 18, you could ask people what they pay for auto, they couldn't tell you. Now people can tell you to the penny because it is a big number. And I will tell you this, I think that what has happened is the companies have stopped taking a long-run view of an insurance business. You've been covering insurance for a long time. There are good days and there are bad days. There are good years and there are bad years. And what the insurance companies have been able to do is to trot down to the commissioner's office and say, we didn't make money last year, fix it. Well, that's not the way the real life works. That's not the way the real world works. I mean, if you have a restaurant that's failing, you don't just go raise prices. You have to address other things. There are legitimate pressures on the business, but there's no reason that Georgia rates should go up twice as fast as the national average and twice as fast as our neighboring states.
Thank you very much. Dave Williams, it's your turn to ask a question.
Well, I want to give Tracy Jordan a chance to talk about the same issue you guys have been talking about, the auto insurance rates, because I know you have on your website, you talk about the need to replace the 2008 state law. What have you seen as the impact of that law? How's it affected Georgians?
First of all, let me say I am flattered that both of my opponents now mention file and use. I believe I was the first candidate that came out and mentioned that. It's on my push cards. It's on my website. My estimation of what happened from 2008, when it was touted to be a boon to save money for the people across Georgia by having deregulation of their automobile insurance premiums, we've seen that's not in fact the case. I've spoken with members of the General Assembly and spoken about how we can petition them to make a change for this to help the family budgets across Georgia, and they are very favorable with me in our conversations. They believe that's something that we can work towards. We quite simply need an insurance commissioner that is strong enough to stand in that office and stand up for the consumers of Georgia. The people are the ones that pay the premiums, and they've paid the price, so to speak, for this deregulation, and I aim to stop that. I want to stand up and fix this broken problem.
Thank you very much. Next question, Andy.
Jay, I'd like for you to address that directly, too. Auto insurance rates are a big problem in this state. What would you specifically do?
They are. I think we need to do a couple of things. One, the legislature did good work this year in passing an anti-distracted driving law. You know, the reality is that too many people are driving around looking down at their cell phones and playing with them in Atlanta traffic and getting into accidents. And more accidents means more claims, and more claims means insurance companies pay more money, and that means you got to pay more in premium. So the legislature did good work in passing that distracted driving bill this year, and that's a good thing. But I think the other thing we need to do is repeal the file and use law. We need to do a couple things. It needs to make sure that the insurance commissioner has the clear authority to overturn a rate that is excessive. That's something I've advocated for a long time, and we actually pushed a bill this year in the legislature to get that done, but it fell short. And I want to pick back up and start working on that on day one of my administration.
Thank you very much. Mr. Beck, I wanted to ask you a question. You said that if the insurance companies come running down to the commissioner's office and say, hey, man, we didn't make any money this year. You need to change things and fix it. You've already said that the law that was passed in 2008, while you may not agree with it, you're okay with it. What do you say to those insurance companies if you're elected as commissioner?
Well, let me say this. I'm not okay with the law, but I don't believe our hands are completely tied. That law was in effect for 2 years under Commissioner Oxendine. You didn't see the runaway rate increases like you have seen under Commissioner Hudgens. So what changed? The commissioner changed. I'm a little bit like Ms. Jordan. I think you have to have the right commissioner with the right attitude in there. I'll give you a great example. Years ago, I was aware of a company that was demanding to Commissioner Oxendine they do something, this particular thing they wanted to do. They said, we have a right to do it. You can't stop us. He looked at them and he said, well, I'll tell you what you do. If you're going to do that on the auto products, you take all your life insurance products and you leave Georgia. You take all your health insurance products and you leave Georgia. Suddenly, they decided maybe they'd take a little more long-run view of the auto insurance. There's a lot of power in that office if you're willing to use it for the consumers and if you're not beholden to the insurance company.
Well, thank you very much. Dave, you have a question.
Actually, this is for all three candidates. I want to move on to health insurance. Republicans, both at the state level and the national level, have never liked Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. In the Trump administration, Congress has moved to repeal parts of it, including the individual coverage mandate. The latest numbers, though, keep coming out showing that the number of Americans since that has happened without health insurance is on the rise. Given that I would think as a Republican candidate you would not want a full restoration of Obamacare, what can we do to get the numbers back down?
We'll start with you, ma'am.
That is an excellent question. We've had an issue that we've had career politicians making decisions for health care. Do you really want more politicians making decisions in those regards, or do you want someone that's been in healthcare that understands the problems and understands the challenges that are experienced by the consumers? In my practice, I have seen too many consumers that once had great insurance that are no longer able to afford insurance. We've seen in counties where there's only one choice, and on the exchange, if you're not insured by a large group policy. We need to make some changes to that, and I've proposed that we think outside of the box, come up with something that will work for everyone. And as a healthcare professional and a business owner and a city council person, I understand that we have to find room and get to the table and get a negotiation started that will work for everyone. Who better than myself as insurance commissioner with an experience in healthcare to meet with the federal government to see what we can do to devise a plan that will work for the people across Georgia.
Thank you very much. Mr. Florence, same question.
I think we need to focus like a laser beam on the middle class and try and lower premiums for the middle class. And you're right to say that I don't support Obamacare. The reality is that since it went into effect, premiums have skyrocketed, not just in Georgia, but around the country. You have a loss of choice, not just in Georgia, but around the country. The law, in my opinion, has not worked. I was one of those people that favored repeal of the law, but obviously that hasn't happened. But I think we have an opportunity with the election of President Trump that he will give more authority back to the states. And what I would like to see the next insurance commissioner do, what I would like to do as insurance commissioner, is file for waivers from Obamacare using a 1332 waiver process to try and create a reinsurance program which will help lower cost of premiums for middle-class Georgians, because that ultimately is what we have to do. We have to make it so that it's affordable for middle-class Georgians to purchase health insurance in the state.
Thank you very much. Mr. Beck, you get the last minute on this question.
So Obamacare was never about providing health insurance for people. It was a power grab over 20% of the gross domestic product of the U.S. That's what it was about, government top-down control. At the end of the day, competition is going to solve the problem. Now, the president's repealed the mandate. Republicans in Congress need to do what they've said they'd do, which is fully repeal. But in the meantime, we've got to encourage competition. And here's the way to do it, Andy. You guys have been following this for a long time, Dave. We need to let hospitals sell insurance directly. What would be wrong with Cobb Wellstar deciding to sell insurance directly? Good Lord, they own the delivery mechanism. And sell through agents. We've got to increase competition. And we're not going to do that by just begging Blue Cross Tennessee to come over here and compete with Blue Cross Georgia. We've allowed Blue Cross Blue Shield to become an 800-pound gorilla. And that gorilla is going to get a leash around it when I'm elected commissioner.
Thank you very much. Andy Miller, you have a question now.
Jay, you've worked closely, obviously, with the current commissioner, and you've gotten his support. If elected, is there anything you would do that would be different from the way Mr. Hudgens is running the office?
Yeah. Look, I'm a different person. I'm grateful for Commissioner Hudgens' support, but I'm a different person and will run the office differently. And frankly, I've worked at a bunch of different levels at the office, and so I understand what a lot of the problems are that need to be fixed. But I think the number one focus of the insurance commissioner has got to be protecting Georgia consumers. And along those lines, I think we need to have a renewed focus on our consumer services division. It's a great team of folks that helps people that are having problems with their insurance companies, helps them get claims paid. But we need to focus on that and make sure that consumers in this state, the Georgia families, know that we're there, and if they have a problem, we can help them. So a renewed focus on consumer services and making sure claims are paid is one thing that I would absolutely do as insurance commissioner.
Dave, we should get the next question.
Again, to all three candidates, Democrats at the state level, the federal level, continue to harp on their necessity, in their opinion, to expand Medicaid coverage through the Affordable Care Act. Governor Deal chose not to do that. Other states also chose not to, but other states did, mostly with federal money. I'd like for each of you to talk about what your position is on Medicaid expansion.
And we'll start this time with you, Mr. Beck.
As my granddaddy would have said, that dog don't hunt down here. We don't need to expand Medicaid. It is a bait and switch. Washington has never delivered on a single of their promises, not even to repeal Obamacare. They haven't fully done that. I don't trust Washington any further than I could throw any of them. And at the end of the day, we have to solve our own problems, and I don't think more government is the answer when it comes to Medicaid, because we're on the hook for that. It's only a matter of time.
Jay Florence on Medicaid expansion.
I agree. I do not think that we should expand Medicaid. As we talked about earlier, Obamacare has not worked. I don't think we need to more fully embrace it. And so I would not favor expanding Medicaid. I will say, as insurance commissioner, it's not really something that we have a lot of authority over. That's a legislative decision and something that the governor's office would need to weigh in on. But as Governor Deal was concerned years ago, that there's no guarantee that the federal government will actually fund the promises of Medicaid expansion, leaving the state on the hook for this massive expansion. But I do not favor Medicaid expansion, but ultimately that is a decision for the governor in the next General Assembly.
And Ms. Jordan, you get the final word on this question.
I am not in favor of Medicaid expansion, and I am the only candidate standing here that has ever billed Medicaid for a patient, that understands the problems that go on with that, and the government often does not deliver on their promises. That's one of my campaign slogans, by the way, make them keep their promises. We need to come up with some better solutions so that we can look after the groups that are falling into the cracks so that they don't have to look at Medicaid as an option. I've had numerous patients that had wonderful insurance and suddenly they can't afford it, and Medicaid has been a choice, and it does not always give the kind of care that they need for their particular illness or problem. We need to not look at expanding that. I believe in smaller government and streamlining and utilizing our resources effectively to look after the consumers of Georgia, and who better to do this as insurance commissioner than someone that has experience billing Medicaid, billing Blue Cross Blue Shield, and negotiating those contracts. I have that experience.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we've got maybe one last question, something that we can have our candidates answer yes or no to.
The Office of Insurance Commissioner has been criticized over the years for being too close to the industry and taking contributions from executives within the industry. Is that a fair and accurate representation of the way the situation is? I'd like to ask all of you that question.
Who starts first?
You start, Tracy.
Yes, I think that's a fair assumption, and it's not just a simple yes answer. May I elaborate beyond that?
We'll take that yes. We're going to go to you, Mr. Florence.
No.
Okay, Mr. Beck.
It's crooked as a dog's hind leg. The industry owns it, and it's time the people owned it.
I want to say thank you very much. That is all the time that we have for questions. Each candidate now has 60 seconds for a closing statement. Jim Beck, you get the first closing statement.
Thank you very much. Insurance is at its core a promise. I learned very early on what happens when you keep your promise. A handshake meant something to my grandmother. When she shook hands with that agent and bought that policy, it didn't mean anything to him. That was the problem. I ran the Consumer Services Division, collected $36 million for consumers. Here's what I want to do for you day one. I want to double the penalties on insurance companies that defraud seniors and veterans. I want to launch rolling regional offices all across the state so that people understand that work at the insurance department, they work for the taxpayer. The taxpayer doesn't work for them. The other thing I want to do is tackle these runaway rate increases. We need rate transparency. You know why you pay for a car repair. You know why you're paying the bill. I bet you know what you pay for insurance, but you don't know why. You have a right to know why. We need that office to be back in the hands of the consumers.
Tracy Jordan, it is now your turn to deliver a 1-minute closing statement.
Thank you. I have spent 27 years as a servant to the community, and I would welcome the opportunity and considering it an honor to be your next insurance commissioner. I am the only candidate that is not beholden to the large insurance companies. I have a simple platform of addressing automobile insurance premiums through ending file and use, dealing with reimbursement reforms so that there's not delays in reimbursement to people that file claims, and physicians' offices that file claims, and rural hospitals, which we've seen those have to close because of delays in reimbursement. And I've said all along that I want to bring back consumer advocacy. Those are my 3 points. We need to look after the consumers, the people across the state of Georgia, and stop favoring the large companies that have all of the money. And I say, follow the means, the motive, and the money, and you will understand why we have so many problems that we're experiencing today. I will take a firm hand as your insurance commissioner and stand up for the people of Georgia. I am Tracy Jordan, Jordan for Georgia.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Jay Florence, you get the final statement.
Well, thank you very much for putting this debate on and for all the thoughtful questions. My name is Jay Florence. I'm a Republican candidate for insurance commissioner. And you know, like a lot of the other Republican politicians that you see campaigning right now for office, I'm conservative. I'm pro-life. I support the Second Amendment. But everybody will tell you that. And that's not really what matters in this race. What matters in this race is you, and whether or not you elect an insurance commissioner that will stand up for you, an insurance commissioner that will hold the insurance companies accountable. And I have a history of doing that. But the reality is, you shouldn't take my word for it, and you shouldn't look at my ads. You can Google me. I've been around. You can see the stories that I've been involved, the things that I've been involved with through news reports over the last several years, and you can do that of my opponent as well. And I encourage you to do that. If you haven't made up your mind in this debate today, then Google our names, see what we've been involved in, see what kind of stories are out there, and see who you want to represent you as your next insurance commissioner.
Thank you, Jay Florence. That concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that the primary elections will be held on Tuesday, May 22nd. Early voting has already begun. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club and all of the debates they will host this primary election season, visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website. That's gpb.org. I'm Candace Presley. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.